At the height of a winter storm, a powerful man finds himself trapped between the cold of the street and the emptiness of his choices. Aimless, he finds shelter in the home of an unknown child who offers warmth where there had once been abandonment. When he opens the door, the past stares back at him in the eyes of the woman he left behind.
Maxwell Grant navigated his Bentley Continental through the treacherous roads of northern Minnesota as the January blizzard intensified. Snow pelted the windshield with increasing ferocity, the wipers barely keeping pace with the onslaught. Weather alerts blared from his dashboard, warning of one of the worst winter storms to hit the region in decades, but Maxwell rarely heeded warnings. As CEO of Grant Tech Solutions, one of Minneapolis's most successful software companies, he'd built his empire by taking calculated risks and pushing through obstacles. "Cancel my dinner with the board," Maxwell commanded through his car's Bluetooth system. "Reschedule for next week. I'll be unreachable for the next few hours." His executive assistant, Taylor, acknowledged the instruction without question. Maxwell's word was law at Grant Tech, and his employees had learned not to challenge his decisions. At 42, he'd cultivated an aura of unwavering authority that served him well in the corporate world, but had gradually hollowed out his personal life. The elegant leather interior of his luxury car insulated him from the harsh realities outside. Climate control kept the cabin at a precise 72 degrees while heated seats enveloped him in warmth. His custom-tailored Italian suit and cashmere sweater completed the cocoon of privilege he'd constructed around himself. The world outside might be in chaos, but Maxwell Grant remained untouched, protected by wealth and status, or so he believed. The Bentley hydroplaned suddenly on a patch of black ice, sending it spinning toward the shoulder of the road. Maxwell gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as he fought for control. For 3 terrifying seconds, he was powerless, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. When the vehicle finally came to rest, it was half buried in a snowbank, the right front tire submerged in a drainage ditch, swollen with icy water. "Damn it," Maxwell muttered, jabbing at the engine start button. The Bentley responded with a sickly whine before falling silent. He tried again with the same result. Something had broken in the impact, perhaps the fuel line or the electrical system. Either way, his $250,000 vehicle was now nothing more than an expensive sculpture in a growing snowdrift. Maxwell reached for his smartphone, ready to summon roadside assistance, but found no signal. The storm had knocked out cell service in the area. For the first time in years, Maxwell Grant was completely disconnected from the network of power and influence he'd carefully constructed. His smartwatch displayed a temperature of -15 degrees Fahrenheit and falling. Night was approaching, and staying with the disabled vehicle would be dangerous, possibly fatal. Looking through the windshield, Maxwell could make out dim lights in the distance, a small neighborhood he'd never noticed despite having driven this route countless times between his Minneapolis penthouse and his lakefront vacation home. It was the type of modest community he typically drove past without a second glance, populated by people who existed in a different world from his own. Reluctantly, Maxwell donned his cashmere overcoat, stylish but woefully inadequate for a Minnesota blizzard, and stepped out into the storm. The wind immediately cut through the expensive fabric, and snow invaded his handcrafted Italian loafers. Each step away from his car felt like abandoning a piece of his identity. The Bentley grew smaller behind him as he trudged through knee-deep snow toward the neighborhood lights. 20 minutes later, Maxwell was soaked to the skin, his extremities numb and his breathing labored. The elegant CEO had been reduced to a shivering, stumbling figure barely distinguishable from any common drifter. The neighborhood, he discovered, was a working-class enclave of modest homes, small, bungalows and ranch-style houses with aging siding and practical vehicles parked in driveways. Maxwell approached the nearest house with lights on, a small blue bungalow with a well-maintained front yard now buried under snow. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch, partially covered by the growing drifts. He hesitated, unused to asking for help and acutely aware of how far he'd strayed from his comfort zone. But with the temperature still dropping and darkness settling in, he had no choice. His numb fingers could barely form a fist to knock on the door. When it finally opened, Maxwell found himself looking down at a little girl, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, with bright green eyes and light brown hair pulled into 2 neat braids. "Hello," the child said, regarding him with calm curiosity rather than fear. "You look really cold." "I am," Maxwell admitted, his teeth chattering. "My car broke down. Could I use your phone to call for help?" The girl studied him for a moment, then stepped back without answering. "Mom," she called over her shoulder, "there's a man outside. He's all wet and shaking." Maxwell heard footsteps approaching, and the door opened wider to reveal a woman in her late 30s. She wore faded jeans and a simple flannel shirt, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. There was something familiar about her face, though Maxwell couldn't place it immediately through his cold-induced fog. But when their eyes met, he watched her expression transform from concern to shock, then harden into something between disbelief and disdain. "Max," she whispered, and the single syllable contained a decade of pain. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. Olivia Winters. The woman he'd walked away from 11 years ago when she needed him most. The promising young artist who'd loved him before he became wealthy, before Grant Tech took off, before he decided that emotional attachments were incompatible with his ambitions. "Olivia," he managed through trembling lips. "I didn't know. I had no idea this was your house." "You wouldn't," she replied coolly. "You've never been here." The little girl looked between them with growing interest. "Mom, do you know him?" Olivia hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorframe as if considering shutting it in Maxwell's face. The wind howled around them, driving another blast of snow against his back. "I did once," she finally answered, then stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze, Max. We can figure the rest out later." Maxwell stumbled across the threshold into warmth that felt almost painful against his frozen skin. The modest entryway led to a cozy living room with well-worn furniture, handmade quilts and walls decorated with colorful artwork, some professional, some clearly created by a child. "Lily, go get a towel for Mr. Grant," Olivia instructed the little girl, who immediately darted off down a hallway. Lily. The name echoed in Maxwell's mind as he calculated quickly. 11 years since he'd left Olivia, a girl who looked to be around 9 or 10. "She's yours," Olivia said quietly, answering his unspoken question with a directness that had once been one of the things he'd loved about her. "But we don't need to get into that right now. You're soaking wet and half frozen." Lily returned with a fluffy blue towel that she handed to Maxwell with a small smile. "Here you go. Mom says hot chocolate helps when you're cold. Do you want some?" Maxwell accepted the towel with numb fingers, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. A daughter. He had a daughter he'd never known about. A child who was looking at him now, not as the powerful CEO of Grant Tech Solutions, but simply as a stranger who needed help. "Thank you," he managed. Hot chocolate would be nice. As he dried his hair and face with the towel, Maxwell looked around the humble home that couldn't be more different from his minimalist penthouse or sprawling lake house. This place was modest in size but undeniably warm, not just in temperature but in essence. Children's drawings on the refrigerator, a bookshelf overflowing with well-read volumes, a hand-knit Afghan thrown over a comfortable-looking sofa. Everything spoke of a life rich in ways that had nothing to do with financial wealth. And in the midst of it all stood Olivia, the woman whose heart he'd broken, whose dreams he'd dismissed, whose love he'd traded for success, watching him with wary eyes as the storm raged outside and their daughter prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune, blissfully unaware that her world was about to change forever. Olivia directed Maxwell to the bathroom, where he could change out of his wet clothes. She handed him a set of faded flannel pajamas and a thick sweater. "They belong to my father," she explained, avoiding his eyes. "He passed away last year. They should fit well enough for now." Maxwell accepted the clothes wordlessly. The Maxwell Grant of that morning, The one who wore only bespoke suits and cashmere would have sneered at such garments. But hypothermia had a way of rearranging priorities. He closed the door and peeled off his drenched designer clothes, now ruined beyond salvation. The bathroom was small but meticulously clean, decorated with seashells and beach photographs, a theme at odds with Minnesota's frigid climate. A child's toothbrush shaped like a mermaid sat in a holder next to an adult one, evidence of the life he'd missed, the family he never knew he had. When Maxwell emerged in the borrowed clothes, he found Olivia and Lily sitting at a small kitchen table. 3 mugs of hot chocolate steamed before them, the one at the empty chair topped with a generous swirl of whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles. "I put extra on yours because you looked the coldest," Lily explained, gesturing to the elaborate concoction. "Thank you," Maxwell said, lowering himself into the chair. He couldn't remember the last time someone had prepared something specifically for him without being paid to do so. "The roads are completely closed," Olivia informed him, her voice carefully neutral. "The storm's expected to last through tomorrow afternoon. The guest bedroom isn't set up, but you can sleep on the couch tonight." Maxwell nodded, knowing that in her position, many people would have turned him away without a second thought. "I appreciate that." An awkward silence fell over the table. Lily glanced between the adults, clearly sensing the tension, but unable to understand its source. "So, you know my mom?" she finally asked Maxwell. "We were friends a long time ago," Olivia interjected before Maxwell could respond. "Before you were born." "Best friends?" Lily persisted. Olivia's fingers tightened around her mug. "Something like that." Maxwell watched Olivia's face, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the spirited artist he'd known 11 years ago. She was still beautiful, but her features had matured, gained definition. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes spoke of both laughter and hardship. Her hands, once stained with paint and clay, now showed signs of practical work, a mother's hands, capable and strong. "Are you famous?" Lily asked Maxwell suddenly. "You look like the people on TV who are important." A surprised laugh escaped him. "Some people might think so," he admitted. "I run a company that makes computer software." "Mom says computers are just tools, and tools are only as good as the person using them," Lily recited, clearly quoting a familiar household maxim. "Your mother is a wise woman," Maxwell said, meeting Olivia's eyes for a fleeting moment. Olivia stood abruptly. "Lily, it's time for your homework. Go set up at the dining table while I talk to Mr. Grant." "But it's Friday," Lily protested. "And you have a science project due Monday," Olivia countered smoothly. 20 minutes of work now means more free time tomorrow." With a dramatic sigh that only a preteen could produce, Lily gathered her homework from her backpack and disappeared into the adjacent room, though not before giving Maxwell one more curious glance. Once they were alone, the pretense of normalcy evaporated. Olivia leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed defensively. "You never told me," Maxwell said, his voice low to prevent Lily from overhearing. "Why?" Olivia's laugh was brittle. "You made it perfectly clear that your career came first. When I tried to call you after we broke up, your assistant said you didn't want to be contacted. What was I supposed to do, Max? Show up at your office 8 months pregnant and create a scene?" The memory surfaced like a long-forgotten bruise. He had instructed Taylor to screen Olivia's calls, had convinced himself it was cleaner that way, kinder somehow. He'd been wrong. "I would have helped financially," he offered lamely. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," Olivia replied, her voice sharp but controlled. "I didn't want your money. I wanted a partner who cared more about people than profit margins. Lily deserved better than child support payments from a father who saw her as an obligation." Her words cut through his defenses with surgical precision. Maxwell had spent years building immunity to criticism, but Olivia had always been able to see through his carefully constructed facade. "She seems like an extraordinary child," he said softly. Something in Olivia's expression shifted, pride momentarily overriding resentment. "She is. She's brilliant, kind, and stronger than any child should need to be." She paused, then added, "She doesn't know about you, Max. To her, her father was just someone who wasn't ready for a family. I never vilified you." The magnitude of Olivia's grace stunned him. He'd abandoned her, yet she'd protected his image in the eyes of their daughter. "I'm sorry," Maxwell said. Two words that felt wholly inadequate, yet were also unfamiliar on his lips. When had he last offered a genuine apology? Olivia studied him, searching for sincerity. "It's been a long time, Max. We've both lived entire lives since then." From the dining room came the sound of pencil scratching on paper as Lily worked on her homework, oblivious to the seismic conversation happening just feet away. "What have you told her about her father?" Maxwell asked. "The truth, mostly. That he and I loved each other once, but he had dreams that didn't include a family. That sometimes people have different paths," Olivia sighed. "I never wanted her to feel unwanted, so I made sure she understood it wasn't about her." Maxwell thought of the life he'd built since leaving Olivia, the accolades, acquisitions, and accomplishments that had defined his existence. None of it had prepared him for this moment. "Does she ever ask about me?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "Less now than when she was younger. She used to ask if you'd ever come back. I told her I didn't think so, but that it wasn't because you wouldn't love her if you knew her." The past tense stabbed at him. Wouldn't love her, as if that possibility had long been foreclosed. "I have a doctor's appointment in Rochester next week," Maxwell said suddenly. "That's why I was on the road. There's a specialist at Mayo Clinic." He stopped, unsure why he was sharing this information. Olivia's expression softened slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Arrhythmia," he answered with practiced casualness. "Probably stress-related. Nothing serious." The lie came automatically. The specialist had been considerably less optimistic, warning of potential complications if he didn't make significant lifestyle changes. Before Olivia could respond, Lily called from the dining room. "Mom, can you help me with this question about ecosystems?" "Coming, sweetie," Olivia replied, then turned back to Maxwell. "We'll figure this out tomorrow. For tonight, you're just a stranded traveler who needs shelter. That's all Lily needs to know." Maxwell nodded, understanding the boundary she was establishing. "Thank you for not turning me away." Something like sadness flickered across Olivia's face. "Whatever happened between us, I wouldn't leave anyone out in that storm." She started toward the dining room, then paused. "The blankets for the couch are in the hall closet. Help yourself to whatever you need." Left alone in the kitchen, Maxwell stared into his cooling hot chocolate, the whipped cream slowly dissolving into a marbled swirl. Outside, the wind howled with undiminished fury, rattling the windows of the small house. The storm that had seemed like an inconvenience hours ago had now delivered him to a crossroads he never anticipated. In the adjacent room, he could hear Olivia patiently explaining something about rainforests to Lily, their voices creating a domestic harmony that made the kitchen seem suddenly empty. Maxwell was accustomed to solitude, had cultivated it even, but for the first time in years, he recognized it for what it truly was: loneliness. He sipped the hot chocolate, finding it sweeter than he would normally prefer, yet oddly comforting. Like the borrowed clothes and the promise of a couch for the night, it represented a kind of simple generosity he'd forgotten existed. As the evening progressed, Maxwell remained on the periphery of the household routine. He observed as Olivia and Lily prepared a simple dinner of vegetable soup and homemade bread. He noticed how they moved around each other with practiced ease, their interactions punctuated by inside jokes and casual affection. When Olivia announced it was time for Lily to prepare for bed, the girl approached Maxwell with unexpected directness. "Are you going to be here tomorrow when I wake up?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "I think so. The storm isn't supposed to clear until the afternoon." Lily nodded as if confirming a hypothesis. "Good. Mom makes special pancakes on Saturdays. They're the best in Minnesota." She hesitated, then added, "Maybe you can help me with my science project. It's about energy conservation. I'd like that." Maxwell replied, surprised to find he meant it. "Okay. Good night, Mr. Grant." She offered a small wave before disappearing down the hallway. When Olivia returned from tucking Lily in, she found Maxwell standing at the living room window, watching the swirling snow in the glow of the street lamp. "She's asleep," Olivia said, keeping her distance. "She usually reads for a while before dropping off, so try to keep the noise down." "Of course," Maxwell agreed. Then, after a moment, "She has your eyes." "And your stubborn streak," Olivia countered, a reluctant half-smile tugging at her lips. "Always has to understand how things work." The observation, so casually delivered yet so profound in its implications, left Maxwell speechless. Here was a fundamental part of himself, recognized and nurtured by the woman he'd left behind. "I'll make up the couch," Olivia said, breaking the moment. She efficiently arranged sheets and blankets, creating a makeshift bed that looked surprisingly inviting. "Bathroom's down the hall if you need it. We usually get up around 7 on Saturdays." "Olivia," Maxwell began, not knowing exactly what he wanted to say but feeling the urgent need to say something. She paused, her hand resting on the door frame. "Not tonight, Max. Whatever it is, it can wait until morning." Her voice wasn't unkind, just firm. "We've both had enough surprises for one day." After she left, Maxwell settled onto the couch, surrounded by the unfamiliar sounds of a family home at night. The hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of floorboards, the soft whir of the heating system battling the brutal cold outside. In his penthouse, he slept with perfected silence. Triple-pane windows, sound-dampening walls, and an expensive mattress designed for optimal rest. Yet as he lay on Olivia's modest couch, wrapped in blankets that carried the faint scent of fabric softener, Maxwell realized he might sleep more soundly here than he had in years. His last thought before drifting off was of Lily asking if he would still be there in the morning. The simplicity of the question belied its deeper significance, a child's innocent inquiry that somehow cut to the heart of his greatest failing. Maxwell woke to the sound of quiet laughter and the smell of coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't place where he was. The ceiling above him wasn't the minimalist expanse of his penthouse, and the furniture surrounding him lacked the austere modernity he'd cultivated in his personal spaces. Then memory rushed back. The storm, the stranded car, Olivia, and most startlingly, Lily, his daughter. The concept still felt foreign, like a word in an unfamiliar language that he couldn't quite pronounce correctly. Sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing a transformed world outside. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline landscape of pristine white. Tree branches hung heavy with snow, and icicles dangled from the eaves like nature's chandeliers. The destruction of the previous night had been transmuted into something beautiful. "Mom, he's awake," Lily's voice called from somewhere nearby, and Maxwell turned to find her standing in the doorway between the living room and kitchen. She wore pajamas decorated with planets and stars, her hair mussed from sleep. "Good morning," Maxwell said, sitting up and running a hand through his own disheveled hair. "You snore," Lily informed him matter-of-factly. "Not super loud, but kind of like this." She proceeded to demonstrate with a gentle rumbling sound that made Maxwell smile despite himself. "Lily, don't be rude," Olivia admonished, appearing behind her daughter. She was already dressed in jeans and a simple green sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. "Good morning, Max. Coffee's ready if you want some." Maxwell folded the blankets neatly, a habit ingrained by his housekeeper's influence, and followed them into the kitchen. The scene that greeted him was one of domestic tranquility. Saturday morning in a home where people genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Pancake batter waited in a mixing bowl, fresh berries were arranged in a colander by the sink, and the radio played soft jazz in the background. "How do you take your coffee?" Olivia asked, already reaching for a mug. "Black is fine," Maxwell replied, accepting the steaming cup with gratitude. The first sip revealed a brew far less sophisticated than the single-origin Ethiopian beans his personal barista prepared each morning, yet somehow more satisfying. The storms cleared faster than they predicted, Olivia said, nodding toward the window. Roads should be plowed by noon. The statement carried an unspoken question. How soon would he leave? Yesterday, Maxwell would have been already calculating the fastest route back to civilization, impatient to return to his structured existence. Today he found himself reluctant to consider departure. I don't suppose my car will be drivable, he mused. I'll need to arrange for a tow. Mr. Hoffman next door works for Peterson's Towing, Lily supplied helpfully. He has a really big truck with chains and everything. That's convenient, Maxwell said, surprised by the straightforward solution. In his world, problems were solved with money and influence, not neighborly connections. Small towns, Olivia explained with a slight shrug. Everyone knows everyone else's business, but when you need help, there's always someone nearby. As promised, Olivia's Saturday pancakes were indeed special, light, fluffy, and dotted with fresh blueberries. The maple syrup came from a local producer, Lily proudly informed him, tapped from trees less than 20 miles away. They ate at the small kitchen table, the morning sun casting everything in a warm glow. Maxwell observed the easy rapport between mother and daughter, the shorthand language of family life. Lily automatically passed the butter without being asked. Olivia knew exactly how much syrup her daughter preferred. These small, unconscious gestures spoke of years of shared routines, years he had missed. So, Lily said between bites, is your computer company very big? Maxwell glanced at Olivia, who nodded slightly, permitting the conversation. Yes, it's fairly large now. We employ about 500 people. Lily's eyes widened. That's more people than my whole school. Do they all listen to you? The question made him pause. Did his employees listen to him, or did they simply obey? There was a distinction he'd never considered before. They're supposed to, he answered honestly. But sometimes I wonder if I listen enough to them. Olivia looked up sharply, something like surprise flickering across her features. The Maxwell she had known rarely questioned his own leadership style. Mom always says listening is more important than talking, Lily said sagely. Especially with people who know different things than you do. Your mother is right, Maxwell agreed, meeting Olivia's eyes across the table. I wasn't always good at that. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when Lily asked if they could work on her science project after breakfast. Maxwell readily agreed, grateful for the neutral territory. The project, it turned out, involved creating a model house with various energy-efficient features. Lily had already constructed the basic structure from cardboard, but needed help with the technical aspects, how to demonstrate solar panels, insulation, and a rainwater collection system. As they worked together at the dining table, Maxwell found himself impressed by Lily's questions and insights. She had a natural aptitude for understanding systems and connections, her mind working several steps ahead. You're very good at this, he told her as she meticulously calculated the angle for optimal solar energy collection. Lily shrugged, but he could tell she was pleased. I like figuring out how things work together. Mom says I get that from her dad, but I don't remember him much. From the kitchen, where she was washing dishes, Olivia called, Grandpa used to take apart clocks just to see how the gears fit together. You definitely have that same curiosity. Did your dad work with technology too? Maxwell asked, curious about the family traits that might have been passed to his daughter. He was a high school science teacher, Olivia answered, joining them at the table. He loved explaining complex ideas in simple ways. Maxwell watched as Olivia gently corrected Lily's calculation, showing her a different approach to the problem. There was a quiet competence in her teaching style that reminded him of the passionate artist he'd known years ago, the woman who could look at a blank canvas and see possibilities others missed. What do you do now, Olivia? He asked suddenly. Are you still painting? A shadow crossed her face. Not professionally. I teach art at the elementary school. It pays the bills. The subtext was clear. Dreams had been adjusted to accommodate reality. Maxwell wondered if she resented him for that as well, for the artistic career that might have flourished without the responsibilities of single motherhood. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, proudly displayed her completed calculation. See? If we angle the solar panels at 32 degrees, they'll collect the most energy in winter when we need it most. That's excellent work, Maxwell praised, genuinely impressed. You have a talent for this. Have you ever thought about engineering? Sometimes, Lily admitted. But I also like drawing and playing piano. Mom says I don't have to decide my whole life yet. She's right, Maxwell agreed. Though his own path had been mapped out since college, a relentless pursuit of success that had left little room for exploration or deviation. The morning passed quickly as they completed the science project. Maxwell found himself enjoying the simple task of helping Lily apply tiny LED lights to demonstrate energy usage. There was something profoundly satisfying in creating something tangible with his hands, a sensation he'd almost forgotten in a world of digital products and virtual meetings. Around 11, a loud rumbling announced the arrival of a plow on their street. The massive vehicle carved a path through the accumulated snow, restoring connection to the wider world. Maxwell felt a strange reluctance as he watched it pass. I should call about my car, he said, though he made no move toward the phone. Use the landline, Olivia suggested. Cell service is still spotty after storms. With Olivia's assistance, Maxwell connected with Mr. Hoffman, who agreed to assess the stranded Bentley that afternoon. The practical matters of insurance information and towing logistics provided a welcome distraction from the more complex emotional terrain they were navigating. When Lily excused herself to video chat with a friend about their completed project, Maxwell and Olivia found themselves alone again. She led him to the kitchen and refilled his coffee cup without asking. She's remarkable, Maxwell said quietly. You've done an amazing job with her. She makes it easy, Olivia replied. She's always been a good kid, curious about everything, quick to forgive, slow to judge. She paused, adding pointedly, qualities I've tried to encourage. The gentle rebuke wasn't lost on Maxwell. I've changed, Liv, he said, using his old nickname for her without thinking. Have you? She challenged, leaning against the counter. From what I read in business magazines, you're still the same driven perfectionist who puts success above everything else. You read about me? The revelation surprised him. Olivia rolled her eyes. It's hard not to. Your face appears on the business section with annoying regularity. Maxwell Grant revolutionizes industry again. Grant Tech CEO named most influential under 45. She shook her head. Lily's school even uses your software for their educational programs. There's a certain irony in that. I didn't know, Maxwell said, genuinely startled by how their worlds had intersected without his knowledge. There's a lot you don't know. Max, Olivia said, her voice softening slightly. 10 years is a long time. From down the hall came the sound of Lily's animated conversation with her friend, punctuated by occasional laughter. Maxwell listened, trying to imagine all the other laughs, tears, milestones, and ordinary moments he had missed. Why did you never remarry? He asked suddenly. The question caught Olivia off guard. That's rather personal, don't you think? I'm sorry. I just wondered if there was a father figure in Lily's life? Olivia finished for him. There have been a few relationships over the years. Nothing that stuck. She twisted the dish towel in her hands. Dating as a single mother isn't exactly straightforward, and Lily always comes first. Maxwell nodded, absorbing this new piece of information with a strange sense of relief he chose not to examine too closely. What about you? Olivia asked. The magazines never mention a Mrs. Grant. There isn't one, Maxwell admitted. Never seemed to find the time. The excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. The truth was more complicated, a series of calculated relationships with women who understood the arrangement. Companionship without commitment, passion without vulnerability, still married to the company. Then, Olivia observed without surprise. It's been a successful marriage in many ways, Maxwell replied, attempting humor that fell flat. Olivia didn't smile. And in others? The question hung between them, deceptively simple, yet impossible to answer honestly, without admitting to the emptiness that had become his constant companion, the void that all his achievements had somehow failed to fill. Before he could formulate a response, the phone rang. Olivia answered it, exchanging a few words with the caller before holding the receiver out to Maxwell. "It's Mr. Hoffman," she explained. "He's at your car." The conversation was brief and definitive. The Bentley had sustained significant damage to its undercarriage and electrical system. It would need to be transported to a specialized service center in Minneapolis, a process that would take at least until Monday given the weekend and the backlog of vehicles requiring attention after the storm. "Looks like you're stranded a bit longer than expected," Olivia said when he hung up. Maxwell nodded, uncertain whether the news brought relief or anxiety. "I should find a hotel. The nearest one is 30 miles away in Riverton," Olivia interjected. "And they're probably booked with stranded travelers." She sighed, then added reluctantly, "You can stay here until Monday. The couch is uncomfortable but serviceable." "I couldn't impose—" "It's not an imposition if it's an invitation," Lily's voice interrupted. She had finished her call and now stood in the doorway. "That's what Mom always says when people apologize for visiting." Olivia gave her daughter a look that was half exasperation, half fondness. "Eavesdropping isn't polite, Lily." "I wasn't dropping any eaves," Lily protested with a grin. "I was walking by and heard." "That's different." She turned to Maxwell. "Are you staying? We're having lasagna tonight, and Mom makes the best garlic bread in the universe." Faced with Lily's open enthusiasm and Olivia's grudging acceptance, Maxwell found himself nodding. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." "It's settled then," Lily declared with satisfaction. "And tomorrow we can show you the lake. It's frozen solid this time of year, and people cut holes to fish through the ice. It's super cool." As Lily launched into a detailed explanation of ice fishing techniques, Maxwell caught Olivia's eye over her head. A silent communication passed between them, an acknowledgement that whatever happened next would inevitably alter 3 lives that had developed independently for a decade. For now, they had agreed to a temporary arrangement, a weekend of borrowed time. What would come after remained unspoken, a question mark hovering in the frigid Minnesota air. Sunday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that transformed the snowbound landscape into a glittering wonderland. Maxwell woke early, his body still adhering to his weekday schedule despite the unusual circumstances. The house was quiet, its other occupants still asleep. He folded the blankets neatly and padded to the kitchen, deciding to make coffee as a small gesture of appreciation. The unfamiliar domestic setting presented a brief challenge. Where did Olivia keep the filters? How strong did she prefer her coffee? But Maxwell prided himself on mastering new systems quickly. By the time Olivia emerged, wrapped in a faded blue bathrobe with her hair tousled from sleep, Maxwell had coffee brewing and was examining the contents of her refrigerator with analytical interest. "You're up early," she observed, reaching automatically for a mug from the cabinet. "Force of habit," Maxwell replied. "I thought I might make breakfast for a change." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You cook now?" "I wouldn't call it cooking," he admitted. "But I can manage scrambled eggs without burning down the house." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "That's an improvement. I seem to recall you once setting off the smoke alarm trying to boil water for pasta." The memory surfaced unexpectedly, their tiny apartment near the university. Maxwell attempting to surprise Olivia with dinner after she'd spent all day in the studio. The disaster that followed had ended with them eating takeout Chinese food on the floor, laughing until their sides hurt. "I've learned a few things since then," Maxwell said, returning to the present, though not enough to impress a 10-year-old food critic. 9, Olivia corrected. "She'll be 10 in March." March. Maxwell filed away this crucial piece of information, his daughter's birthday, with a pang of regret for the 9 he had missed. "She seems older," he offered. "The way she thinks, how she expresses herself." "She's always been that way," Olivia said, settling at the kitchen table with her coffee. perceptive beyond her years. Sometimes I forget she's still a child. They worked together, preparing a simple breakfast, finding an unexpected rhythm as they moved around the kitchen. When Lily finally appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she seemed pleasantly surprised to find Maxwell scrambling eggs while her mother sliced fresh fruit. "You didn't burn anything," she observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Try not to sound so shocked," Maxwell replied dryly, which made Lily giggle. Breakfast conversation revolved around plans for the day. As promised, Lily was determined to show Maxwell the frozen lake and the ice fishing community that sprang up there each winter. Olivia seemed hesitant, but ultimately agreed when Lily pointed out that the fresh air would do them all good. An hour later, bundled in borrowed winter gear, Olivia had unearthed her father's old parka and boots for Maxwell. They trekked through the neighborhood toward the lake. Maxwell's Italian leather loafers remained drying by the heating vent, utterly unsuitable for Minnesota winter. "Mr. Jenkins always builds the best ice house," Lily explained as they walked, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "It has carpet and a propane heater and even a TV for watching hockey games." "Sounds more comfortable than some apartments I've lived in," Maxwell remarked, earning a surprised look from Olivia. "You lived in apartments?" Lily asked, clearly struggling to reconcile this with her image of him as a business magnate. "I wasn't always CEO of a technology company," Maxwell explained. "I started coding in a one-bedroom apartment with a futon and a hot plate." "Like a startup," Lily exclaimed. "We learned about those in school. People with good ideas who build companies from nothing." "Exactly like that," Maxwell agreed, oddly pleased by her understanding. The lake, when they reached it, was a vast white expanse stretching toward the horizon. Dotted across its surface were colorful ice houses, small structures ranging from elaborate mini-cabins to simple pop-up shelters. People moved between them, drilling holes in the thick ice or gathering in social clusters despite the cold. "It's like a little village," Maxwell observed. "That's what Mom always says," Lily replied, tugging him forward eagerly. "Come on, I want to show you where we caught a northern pike last year. It was this big!" She stretched her arms wide in the universal gesture of fishing tails. As they ventured onto the ice, Maxwell felt a peculiar sensation, not just the physical unsteadiness of walking on a frozen lake, but a deeper metaphorical significance. For the first time in years, he was on uncertain ground, navigating without the usual markers of status and control. They spent an hour exploring the ice fishing community, with Lily proudly introducing Maxwell to various neighbors and friends. He was struck by how people greeted him without deference or agenda, just another visitor to their frozen domain. No one recognized him as the Maxwell Grant of business magazines and tech conferences, and the anonymity was strangely refreshing. "Tom's got a spare hole if you want to try your hand," an elderly man called Jenkins offered, gesturing to his elaborate ice house. "I wouldn't know the first thing about fishing," Maxwell admitted. Jenkins chuckled. "Not much to know. Drop the line, wait, jig it a little. The fish do most of the work." Before he knew it, Maxwell found himself seated on a plastic bucket inside the surprisingly cozy ice house, a fishing rod in his gloved hands, receiving instructions from Lily and Jenkins with equal authority. Olivia watched from a folding chair, a thermos of hot chocolate between her hands, her expression a mixture of amusement and caution. "You just have to be patient," Lily instructed seriously. "Fish don't care if you're in a hurry." The observation struck Maxwell as profoundly true beyond its immediate context. Nature operated on its own timeline, indifferent to human schedules and ambitions. When was the last time he had allowed himself to simply wait, to exist without productivity or purpose? They didn't catch anything, but Maxwell found he didn't mind. There was something meditative about the experience, the silence broken only by occasional conversation, the hypnotic motion of the fishing line, the democratic camaraderie of the ice house where CEO and retiree sat as equals. As they walked back to the house later, Lily ran ahead, stopping occasionally to make snow angels or examine interesting icicle formations. Olivia and Maxwell fell into step beside each other, their breaths synchronizing in the cold air. "She's taken quite a shine to you," Olivia observed quietly. "She's easy to like," Maxwell replied, watching as Lily attempted to slide across a particularly smooth patch of ice. "She doesn't know who I am, does she? I mean, in relation to her." Olivia shook her head. "No, and I'm not sure how to approach that conversation, or if we should at all, given that you'll be leaving tomorrow." The reminder of his imminent departure landed like a stone in Maxwell's stomach. The weekend had created a strange bubble outside normal time, a glimpse into a parallel life where different choices had been made. Tomorrow would bring reality crashing back. What if I didn't leave? Or at least not right away? The words emerged before Maxwell had fully processed them. Olivia stopped walking. "What are you saying, Max?" He turned to face her, suddenly certain. "I'm saying I want to know my daughter. I'm saying that this weekend has shown me things about myself and my life that I can't just walk away from. I'm saying that maybe there's a way to be part of Lily's life, even if it's just as a friend of her mother's for now." "You can't just insert yourself into her life and then disappear again when you get bored or busy," Olivia said, her voice hardening. "She's not a project or a hobby." "I know that," Maxwell insisted. "I'm not suggesting moving in or disrupting your lives. But maybe I could rent a place nearby for a while, visit regularly, build something sustainable. And your company? Your life in Minneapolis? Grant Tech has excellent management. I can work remotely for non-essential matters." Maxwell surprised himself with how easily the solution presented itself. "It's only a 2-hour drive. I could commute when necessary." Olivia studied him with wary eyes. "This is impulsive even for you. Yesterday you were stranded. Today you're talking about relocating. What happens when the novelty wears off?" The question was fair, more than fair. Maxwell had always been driven by new challenges, moving restlessly from one accomplishment to the next. What evidence could he offer that this wouldn't be the same? "I've spent the last decade filling my life with things that ultimately don't matter," he said slowly. "The company, the awards, the money, none of it has given me what I felt sitting in that ice house today, just being present with Lily and you. I'm not asking you to believe me yet. I'm asking for a chance to prove it." "Mom." "Mr. Grant, look what I've found!" Lily's voice interrupted their conversation. She was holding up what appeared to be a perfectly preserved pine cone, her face alight with discovery. "We'll talk more later," Olivia murmured before calling back to her daughter. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." The afternoon passed with domestic tranquility that felt increasingly precious to Maxwell. He helped Lily organize her school supplies for the coming week, while Olivia prepared the promised lasagna. They ate together at the small kitchen table, sharing stories and laughter that felt both novel and somehow familiar, as if they were remembering rather than creating this family dynamic. After dinner, Lily convinced them to play a board game, an old edition of Monopoly with faded property cards and mismatched playing pieces. Maxwell, who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with ruthless efficiency, found himself genuinely challenged by his daughter's surprising strategic instincts. "You're bankrupting me," he complained good-naturedly as Lily collected rent on her hotel-laden boardwalk. "It's just business, Mr. Grant," she replied with a cheeky grin that reminded him startlingly of his own expression in negotiation meetings. Olivia, who had been eliminated earlier, watched them from the couch with a complicated expression, part warmth, part wariness, as if she couldn't quite decide whether to embrace or resist the tableau before her. When Lily reluctantly went to bed, extracting a promise from Maxwell that he wouldn't leave in the morning without saying goodbye, the adults found themselves alone again. Olivia made tea, a nightly ritual, she explained, and they settled in the living room, the Monopoly board still displaying the evidence of Lily's decisive victory. "She gets her competitive streak from you," Olivia observed, cradling her mug between her hands. "And her creativity from you," Maxwell countered, noticing for the first time the drawings displayed on the refrigerator, Landscape scenes rendered with surprising skill for a 9-year-old. She's the best of both of us somehow. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken possibilities. I meant what I said earlier, Maxwell finally continued. I want to be part of her life. Your life too, if you'll allow it. Olivia sighed, setting down her tea. It's not that simple, Max. You can't just decide one day that you want to be a father and expect everything to fall into place. Parenting isn't a part-time commitment. I know that, Maxwell insisted. I'm not expecting to just step into a role I haven't earned, but I want the chance to earn it. And what happens to Lily if you change your mind? If the reality of parenting, the school projects and doctor appointments and mundane responsibilities becomes too much? Olivia's voice cracked slightly. I won't let her be abandoned twice. The accusation stung because it carried the weight of history. Maxwell had walked away once. Why should she believe he wouldn't do it again? I can't erase the past, he acknowledged. I can't take back leaving you when you needed me most. That will always be between us. But I can commit to being better now. I can promise to be consistent for Lily. Promises are easy, Olivia said softly. Following through is harder. Then let me prove it through actions, Maxwell urged. Give me 6 months. If at any point you feel I'm not fully committed or that my presence is hurting rather than helping Lily, I'll step back. Olivia studied him, her expression thoughtful. You'd really stay in Lakeside? Give up your penthouse and executive lifestyle to live in a town where the biggest excitement is the annual ice fishing tournament? I'm not saying it wouldn't be an adjustment, Maxwell admitted. But I've spent the last decade chasing the next big thing, the next milestone. It's exhausting, Liv, and ultimately empty. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, a softening, perhaps, or at least a willingness to consider. Where would you stay? There's a rental cabin on the north side of the lake, Maxwell replied, recalling a conversation he'd overheard at the ice fishing community. Jenkins mentioned the owner's in Florida for the winter. It's small but furnished and available immediately. You've already inquired about it? Olivia asked, surprised. I got his number, Maxwell explained. I haven't called yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. And what would you tell Lily? She's going to have questions. The truth, Maxwell said simply. Or as much of it as you think she's ready to hear. I'll follow your lead on that. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, marking the passage of time as Olivia considered. Outside, the temperature was dropping again, frost patterns forming on the edges of the windows. 6 months, she finally said. We start slowly. Dinner once a week, maybe helping with homework. We tell Lily that you're an old friend who's decided to spend some time in Lakeside. Nothing about being her father, not yet. Not until we're sure this is sustainable. Relief and gratitude washed over Maxwell. Thank you. I won't let either of you down. Don't thank me yet, Olivia cautioned. This is an experiment, not a commitment. And it comes with conditions. You maintain appropriate boundaries. You defer to me on parenting decisions. You show up when you say you will. Every time, no excuses about emergency meetings or business crises. Agreed, Maxwell said without hesitation. Olivia nodded, her decision made. Then call about that cabin in the morning. But Max, her eyes met his with unwavering directness. If you walk away from her again, don't ever come back. I mean that. She deserves consistency or nothing at all. The ultimatum was fair, necessary even. I understand. Later, as Maxwell settled onto the couch for what would be his last night there before moving to the rental cabin, he found himself reflecting on the seismic shift in his priorities. 3 days ago, his concerns had revolved around quarterly projections and market expansion. Now, they centered on how to build a meaningful connection with a 9-year-old girl who had unwittingly captured his heart with her intelligence and unguarded smile. His phone had long since regained signal, and a barrage of messages awaited his attention. Board members seeking decisions, his assistant rescheduling meetings, various crises that had seemed paramount before the storm. Maxwell answered only what was essential, delegated where possible, and for the first time in his career, set boundaries around his availability. The choice felt not like sacrifice but liberation, as if he had been carrying a burden he hadn't recognized until setting it down. Outside, the Minnesota winter continued its frozen rain, but inside, something long dormant had begun to thaw. By mid-February, Maxwell had settled into a routine that would have been unrecognizable to his former self. The rental cabin on the north side of Lake Willow, rustic by his standards but comfortable enough, had become a genuine home rather than just temporary accommodation. He had his essential belongings shipped from Minneapolis, selecting only what truly mattered and placing the rest in storage. The cabin's main room served as both living space and remote office. A large wooden desk positioned before the picture window overlooking the frozen lake housed his laptop and a single monitor, a stark contrast to the wall of screens that had dominated his executive suite. Each morning, he rose early to take a brisk walk along the lake shore before logging in to handle essential Grant Tech business. Afternoons and evenings were increasingly reserved for Lily and, by extension, Olivia. What had begun as weekly dinners quickly expanded to include homework help, weekend activities, and impromptu visits. Lily had accepted the explanation that Maxwell was an old friend of her mother's who was taking a sabbatical from city life. Her natural curiosity meant she peppered him with questions about his company, his childhood, his favorite books, each answer forming another bridge between them. "The school's science fair is next Wednesday," Lily announced one evening as they finished dinner at Olivia's house. "Mr. Peters says my energy-efficient house model has a good chance of winning." "That's wonderful," Maxwell replied, genuinely proud. He'd helped her refine the project over several weekends, adding working LED lights and a miniature water reclamation system. "I'd like to attend, if that's okay." Lily beamed. "Really? It starts at 6. Most parents come after work." The word parents hung in the air between the three of them. Maxwell glanced at Olivia, who gave a slight nod of permission. "I wouldn't miss it," he promised. Later, after Lily had gone to her room to practice piano, a ritual that filled the small house with sometimes halting but increasingly confident melodies, Olivia joined Maxwell on the porch. Despite the cold, they had taken to spending a few minutes outside after dinner, wrapped in heavy blankets, watching stars emerge above the frozen lake. "You've been consistent," Olivia acknowledged, breaking a comfortable silence. "I wasn't sure you would be." "Neither was I," Maxwell admitted. "But it's been easier than I expected." "Because she's easy to love," Olivia said softly. "Yes," Maxwell agreed. "And because this is the first thing I've done in years that feels completely right." He hesitated, then added, "My doctor at Mayo called yesterday with my latest test results." Olivia turned to look at him, concern evident in her expression. Maxwell had been more forthcoming about his health issues over the past weeks, gradually revealing the seriousness of the cardiac arrhythmia that had prompted his initial journey to Rochester. "What did they say?" she asked. "The irregular heartbeat has stabilized significantly," Maxwell reported. Dr. Levine called it remarkable improvement. He asked what changes I'd made, diet, exercise, medication. "And what did you tell him?" Maxwell smiled slightly. "That I'd found something worth slowing down for." The admission hung between them, honest in a way their conversations had rarely been before. Since his decision to stay in Lakeside, they had maintained a careful distance, friendly but bounded, focused primarily on Lily. Yet something was shifting gradually, like ice beginning to thaw at the edges of the lake. "I've been thinking," Maxwell continued, "about whether we should tell Lily the truth soon. I know we agreed to wait, but—" "I've been thinking the same thing," Olivia interjected. "She's starting to ask questions. Yesterday she commented that you have the same habit of tapping your fingers when you're thinking about something." "I hadn't noticed that," Maxwell said, surprised. "Children see patterns adults miss," Olivia replied, "and she's particularly observant." "How do you think she'll react?" The question had been weighing on Maxwell for weeks. Olivia considered carefully before answering. I think she'll be shocked initially, then curious, then probably angry at least for a while. She turned to face him directly. Are you prepared for that? For her to be upset with you? To ask difficult questions about why you weren't there? The prospect was daunting, but Maxwell nodded. She deserves honesty and the chance to express whatever she feels about it. I just don't want her to think I stayed away because of her, that she wasn't wanted. We'll make sure she understands it wasn't about her, Olivia assured him. But Max, we need to be absolutely certain this is permanent before we tell her. Once that door is opened, it can't be closed again. I'm certain, Maxwell said without hesitation. The only question is whether you believe me. Olivia's gaze was penetrating, searching for any sign of doubt or insincerity. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slowly. After the science fair, then. She should have that moment without complications. Agreed, Maxwell said, feeling both trepidation and relief at the decision. A week later, Maxwell sat in the elementary school gymnasium alongside dozens of other parents and community members, watching as Lily confidently explained her energy-efficient house model to the judges. She was poised and articulate, her enthusiasm for the subject evident in every gesture. She gets her presentation skills from you, Olivia whispered beside him. That same ability to make complex ideas seem simple. The observation, so casually delivered yet profound in its implications, struck Maxwell deeply. Here was evidence that he had contributed something positive to his daughter beyond mere genetics. When Lily was awarded first place in her division, her face lit up with a joy so pure that Maxwell felt his throat tighten with emotion. She clutched the blue ribbon as if it were an Olympic medal, scanning the audience until she spotted them. The wave she offered was for both Olivia and him, equal recipients of her triumph. The drive home was filled with Lily's excited recounting of the judges' comments and her plans to expand the project for the regional competition. When they arrived at the house, Olivia surprised them both by producing a cake she'd hidden in the refrigerator, chocolate with vanilla frosting, decorated with a wobbly but heartfelt, "Congratulations, scientist." As Lily blew out the single celebratory candle, Maxwell caught Olivia's eye across the table. A silent communication passed between them, confirmation that tonight was the night for truth. After cake and hot chocolate, when the excitement had mellowed into a pleasant glow of accomplishment, Olivia gently suggested they all sit in the living room for a talk. Lily, perceptive as always, immediately sensed the shift in atmosphere. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, glancing between them. "Not at all," Olivia assured her. "But there's something important we need to tell you. Something about Mr. Grant, about Maxwell that you should know." Lily settled on the sofa beside her mother, her science fair ribbon still clutched in one hand. Maxwell took the armchair opposite, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with his medical condition. "Honey," Olivia began, her voice gentle but direct. "Remember how I've told you that your father and I cared for each other once? But he had to go away before you were born?" Lily nodded, her expression suddenly serious. "You said he had dreams that didn't include a family." The words, plainly repeated in Lily's clear voice, landed like stones in Maxwell's chest. "That was true," Olivia continued, "but what I never told you was his name, or what happened to him after he left." She took a deep breath. "Maxwell is your father, Lily." The silence that followed seemed endless. Lily's eyes, wide and questioning, moved from her mother to Maxwell and back again, as if searching for confirmation or contradiction. "Is that true?" she finally asked, addressing Maxwell directly. "Yes," he answered, his voice steadier than he expected. "I'm your father, but I didn't know about you until the night of the snowstorm. Your mother never told me she was pregnant when I left." Lily processed this information with remarkable composure, her analytical mind visibly working through the implications. "So you didn't know I existed until January? That's why you stayed in Lakeside? To know me?" "Exactly," Maxwell confirmed. "Once I found out about you, I couldn't imagine going back to my old life without getting to know my daughter." Lily turned to her mother. "Why didn't you tell him about me back then?" Olivia's answer was honest. Because he had made it clear that his career came first. "I wanted you to be raised by people who would put you first, always. At the time, I didn't think that included your father." "And now?" Lily pressed, displaying the directness that reminded Maxwell so much of himself. "Now I believe he's changed," Olivia said carefully. "That's why we're telling you the truth." Lily was quiet again, staring at her hands for a long moment. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "Can I ask you things? About why you left?" "You can ask me anything," Maxwell assured her. "I promise to answer. Honestly." What followed was the most difficult conversation of Maxwell's life, more challenging than any negotiation or crisis management situation he'd faced as CEO. Lily's questions were straightforward but penetrating. Why had he left her mother? Had he ever thought about having a family? Did he regret his choice? Would he have come back if there hadn't been a snowstorm? Maxwell answered each one truthfully, without excuses or embellishment. He explained how his ambition had consumed him, how he'd convinced himself that personal sacrifice was necessary for professional success. He admitted that he had thought about Olivia over the years, but had pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on building his company. "I made mistakes," he concluded. "Serious ones. And I missed 10 years of your life that I can never get back. I regret that more than anything." Lily considered this, her expression solemn. "Are you going to leave again? When you get tired of Lakeside or when your company needs you?" "No," Maxwell said firmly. "I'm here to stay, Lily. My company doesn't need me physically present to function. But you and your mother, you matter more than Grant Tech ever could." "But what if you change your mind?" The vulnerability in her question cut deep. "I won't," Maxwell promised. "But I understand why that's hard to believe. Actions matter more than words, and I intend to show you through my actions that I'm committed to being in your life, however you'll allow me to be." Lily nodded slowly, then asked the question Maxwell had been dreading most. "Should I call you Dad now?" Olivia intervened gently. "That's entirely up to you, sweetie. You can continue calling him Maxwell if that feels right, or Mr. Grant or anything else. There's no rush to decide." Relief flooded through Maxwell at Olivia's wisdom. "Your mother's right," he agreed. "I haven't earned that title yet. What matters is that you're comfortable." The conversation continued late into the evening, with periods of intense questioning interspersed with reflective silence. Throughout it all, Lily maintained a composure that impressed both adults, processing the revelation with remarkable maturity. When Olivia finally suggested it was time for bed, Lily stood and gathered her science fair ribbon and certificate. At the hallway entrance, she paused and turned back to Maxwell. "I'm glad you got stuck in the snow," she said simply. "And I'm glad you're staying in Lakeside." It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, not yet, but it was an opening, a possibility. For Maxwell, it was more precious than any business achievement. "So am I," he replied, "more than I can say." After Lily had gone to bed, Olivia and Maxwell sat in exhausted silence for several minutes. The emotional intensity of the evening had drained them both. "She handled it better than I expected," Olivia finally said. "She's remarkable," Maxwell agreed. "But there will be more questions, more feelings to process." "This is just the beginning," Olivia nodded. "She might swing between curiosity and anger for a while. Don't take it personally if she seems to push you away sometimes." "I won't," Maxwell assured her. "I'm in this for the long haul, whatever it brings." As February gave way to March, the ice on Lake Willow began to show signs of spring's approach. Tiny fissures appeared first, then widening cracks as the temperature gradually rose. The transformation was slow but inevitable, winter's solid certainties yielding to spring's fluid possibilities. Maxwell's relationship with Lily underwent a similar thaw. Some days she was full of questions about his life before, eager to discover the missing pieces of her own history. Other days she maintained a careful distance, processing her feelings in private. Maxwell respected both states equally, following Olivia's guidance on when to engage and when to step back. One particularly significant moment came when Lily asked to see his cabin for the first time. Maxwell had deliberately kept his living space separate, not wanting to force any aspect of his presence on her. But 6 weeks after the truth had been revealed, she expressed curiosity about where and how he lived. The visit became an unexpected bonding opportunity. Lily examined his makeshift office setup with interest, asking detailed questions about how remote work functioned. She studied the few personal items he'd brought from Minneapolis, books, photographs, a small collection of geology specimens that had been his hobby in college. "You don't have very many things," she observed, comparing his sparse furnishings to her own home filled with mementos and artwork. "I'm learning that I don't need very much," Maxwell replied honestly. "For a long time, I thought success meant accumulating money, property, achievements. Now I'm finding that the most important things can't be measured that way." Lily nodded sagely. "Mom always says the best things in life aren't things." "Your mom is very wise," Maxwell agreed, realizing how frequently he found himself acknowledging Olivia's wisdom these days. As they walked back to Lily's house along the lake shore, she slipped her hand into his without comment, the first such gesture she had initiated. Maxwell felt the small, warm fingers against his palm and knew with sudden clarity that no business triumph had ever made him feel so accomplished. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Olivia invited Maxwell to stay for a glass of wine, another first in their cautiously evolving relationship. They sat on the porch despite the chill, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars emerge above the partially thawed lake. "There's something I never told you," Olivia said after a comfortable silence. "Something about when I found out I was pregnant." Maxwell turned to her, surprised by the introduction of this new topic. "What is it?" Olivia stared into her wine glass for a moment before continuing. "There was a brief time when I wasn't certain who the father was." The revelation caught Maxwell completely off guard. "What do you mean?" "After you left, I was devastated," Olivia explained. "A few weeks later, I went out with friends, had too much to drink, and made a poor decision with someone I barely knew. It was just once, and I regretted it immediately." She sighed. "When I discovered I was pregnant, the timing was such that there was a small possibility that I might not be Lily's biological father." Maxwell finished, processing this new information. "Yes, I calculated the dates a dozen times. The odds strongly favored you, but there was that shadow of doubt." Olivia met his gaze directly. "I had a paternity test done after she was born. It confirmed what I already knew in my heart. She's yours, Max. Genetically unmistakably yours." Maxwell absorbed this, recognizing the courage it took for Olivia to share such a vulnerable truth. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you've earned complete honesty," she replied. "And because I want you to know that I never kept her from you out of spite or uncertainty. It was only ever about protecting her from being secondary in your life." Something powerful shifted between them in that moment, a deeper level of trust established through vulnerability and truth. "It wouldn't have mattered," Maxwell said after a moment's reflection. "If you'd told me about that possibility back in January, or if the test had shown different results, it wouldn't have changed how I feel about Lily now." Olivia smiled slightly. "That's how I know you've truly changed. Max, the man I knew 11 years ago would have demanded scientific certainty before making any commitment." "The man you knew 11 years ago was a fool," Maxwell said quietly. "He had no idea what really mattered." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Maxwell felt the same connection that had drawn them together in college, a recognition of something essential in each other that transcended circumstance or time. As March progressed and true spring began asserting itself across the Minnesota landscape, Maxwell received a call from his doctor at Mayo Clinic. "Your test results are remarkable, Mr. Grant," Dr. Levine reported. "The arrhythmia has stabilized beyond our most optimistic projections. Whatever lifestyle changes you've implemented, I encourage you to maintain them." "I intend to," Maxwell assured him, glancing out his cabin window toward the lake where Lily and Olivia were setting up a picnic on the newly revealed shoreline. They had invited him to join them once his virtual board meeting concluded, a family outing in all but name. The medical improvement wasn't surprising to Maxwell. Every day in Lakeside felt like another step in a healing process he hadn't known he needed, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually as well. The simplified lifestyle, meaningful connections, and rhythm of small-town life had created space for recovery that no prescription could provide. As he ended the call and prepared to join Olivia and Lily by the lake, Maxwell reflected on how completely his priorities had shifted in just a few months. The corporate victories that had once defined his worth now seemed hollow compared to Lily's smile when she mastered a difficult piano piece, or the quiet conversations with Olivia that increasingly stretched late into the evening. Spring had arrived, not just in the thawing landscape around Lake Willow, but in Maxwell's heart as well, and with it came the promise of new beginnings, second chances, and the courage to nurture what truly mattered. By late April, the transformation of Lake Willow was complete. Ice that had dominated the landscape for months had surrendered entirely to sparkling blue water. Barren trees now sported tender green buds, and the first wildflowers appeared in woodland clearings. The seasonal shift mirrored the changes in the relationships between Maxwell, Olivia, and Lily. What had once been frozen and tentative was gradually blooming into something vibrant and alive. Maxwell's 6-month trial period was approaching its midpoint. The cabin that had begun as temporary accommodation now felt legitimately like home, personalized with small touches that reflected his evolving priorities. Photographs of Lily at her science fair victory, and the three of them ice-fishing decorated walls once bare. A piano, delivered as a surprise after Lily mentioned wanting to practice more regularly, occupied the corner of the main room, frequently drawing her to visit. Most significantly, Lily had begun referring to him as Dad, the transition happening naturally after a fishing trip in early April when she'd called out the title without premeditation. Neither of them had commented on it directly, but Maxwell treasured the moment as a milestone in their developing bond. One Tuesday afternoon, Maxwell finished a video conference earlier than expected and decided to surprise Lily by picking her up from school. He texted Olivia to ensure she approved, receiving a thumbs-up emoji in response, another small sign of the growing trust between them. As he walked toward Lakeside Elementary, Maxwell reflected on how thoroughly his routines had changed. 6 months ago, he would have filled an unexpected free hour with additional work calls. Now, his first thought was how to spend time with his daughter. The shift felt not like sacrifice, but like clarity, as if he'd been viewing life through a fogged lens that had finally been wiped clean. "Dad!" Lily's face lit up with surprise when she spotted him outside the school building. She broke away from a group of friends, her backpack bouncing as she ran to greet him. "What are you doing here?" "Thought I'd walk you home," Maxwell explained, still marveling at how naturally she now used the title. "If that's okay?" "It's great. I can show you my classroom. Ms. Abernathy said parents could come see our ecosystem projects anytime this week." She tugged his hand, leading him toward the entrance. Inside the school, Maxwell found himself in unfamiliar territory. Elementary schools had changed considerably since his own childhood, and he'd never had reason to visit one as an adult. The hallways were lined with student artwork and science projects, a riot of color and creativity that contrasted sharply with the minimalist corporate environments he was accustomed to. Lily guided him confidently through the building to a classroom decorated with plants and terrariums. A woman in her 50s looked up from her desk, greeting Lily with a warm smile. "Ms. Abernathy, this is my dad," Lily announced, the pride in her voice unmistakable. "Mr. Grant, I'm delighted to finally meet you," the teacher replied, extending her hand. "Lily's told us so much about your help with her science projects." Maxwell shook her hand, registering the casual way she accepted his identity as Lily's father, no hint of confusion or judgment about his recent appearance in her life. "It's been my pleasure. Lily has a natural aptitude for scientific thinking." "She certainly does," Ms. Abernathy agreed. "Her ecosystem model is one of our classroom highlights. Lily, why don't you show your father your project?" Lily led him to a large terrarium near the window, carefully constructed to demonstrate various ecological principles. She explained each element with precision and enthusiasm, revealing a depth of understanding that impressed both Maxwell and her teacher. "You've done exceptional work," Maxwell told her when she finished, meaning every word. "Indeed she has," Ms. Abernathy concurred. "In fact, I've recommended Lily for our district's advanced science program next year. It's an enrichment opportunity for students who demonstrate particular aptitude." "Really?" Lily's eyes widened. "You didn't tell me that!" "I wanted to speak with your mother first," the teacher explained. "There's an information session for parents next week." "Mom will definitely want me to do it," Lily declared confidently. "And Dad can help with the projects. He knows all about technology and engineering." The casual way Lily included him in future plans touched Maxwell deeply. She was envisioning a continued presence in her life, not a temporary arrangement. As they walked home along the tree-lined streets of Lakeside, Maxwell listened as Lily chattered about school, friends, and her upcoming piano recital. The ordinary details of her life had become extraordinary to him, precious insights into the person she was becoming. "Dad," she said suddenly, interrupting her own story about classroom dynamics, "are you going to stay in Lakeside forever?" The directness of the question caught Maxwell off guard. "I plan to stay as long as you and your mother are comfortable having me here," he answered carefully. "Why do you ask?" Lily kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "Jenny Porter's dad moved to Arizona last year. He said he'd visit all the time, but he only came twice. Now they just do video calls on Sundays?" She looked up at him, vulnerability evident in her expression. "I don't want you to be like that." Maxwell stopped walking and knelt to meet her at eye level, recognizing the importance of this moment. "Lily, I promise you I'm not going anywhere. My home is here now, close to you. The cabin isn't temporary." "But what about your big company in Minneapolis?" "Grant Tech will continue functioning whether I'm physically there or not," Maxwell explained. "I've built a team of excellent people who manage day-to-day operations. For the few things that require my in-person attention, I can commute when necessary." Lily studied his face with the penetrating gaze she'd inherited from her mother. "Do you promise? Even if it gets boring here compared to the city?" "I promise," Maxwell said solemnly. "And Lakeside could never be boring with you and your mother here." He hesitated, then added the deeper truth. "My life before the penthouse, the meetings, the business dinners, that was actually the boring part. I just didn't realize it until I found what really matters." Lily considered this, then nodded with the decisiveness that reminded him so much of himself. "Okay, but you should probably tell Mom that too. She worries when she thinks I'm not listening." The insight caught Maxwell by surprise. "She worries that I'll leave?" "Sometimes," Lily confirmed. "I heard her talking to Aunt Sarah on the phone last week. She said she's afraid to get used to you being here." The revelation settled heavily in Maxwell's chest. Despite the progress they'd made, Olivia still harbored understandable doubts about his commitment. He couldn't blame her. His track record hardly inspired confidence. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Maxwell brought it up directly. They were sitting on Olivia's porch, a ritual that had evolved from occasional conversations to nightly habit. The spring air was cool, but not uncomfortable, scented with lilacs from the bush that grew alongside the house. "Lily mentioned something interesting today," Maxwell began. "She said you're worried about getting used to my presence here." Olivia's expression flickered with surprise, then resignation. "She has remarkably good hearing for conversations she's not supposed to be part of." "Is it true?" Maxwell pressed gently. Olivia sighed, drawing her cardigan closer around her shoulders. "Partly," she admitted. "It's not that I doubt your intentions, Max. I can see how much you love her, how committed you are right now. But you're waiting for the novelty to wear off," Maxwell finished for her. "For my old ambitions to resurface." "Something like that," Olivia acknowledged. "You thrived on challenge, on conquest. Lakeside is many wonderful things, but it's not exactly a hub of innovation and opportunity." Maxwell considered her words carefully, recognizing the legitimate concern behind them. "I've been thinking about that myself," he admitted. "Not about leaving, but about finding the right balance between my past and present." "What do you mean?" "Grant Tech was never just about money or status for me," Maxwell explained. "At its core, it was about creating something meaningful, solving problems through innovation. I still believe in that mission." "So you are feeling restless," Olivia concluded, a note of resignation in her voice. "Not restless," Maxwell corrected. "Evolutionary. I'm realizing I don't have to choose between being Lily's father and continuing to build something significant. I just need to redefine what significant means." He stood and began pacing the small porch, energy infusing his movements as he articulated the idea that had been forming for weeks. "Lakeside has excellent schools, but limited resources for STEM education beyond the basics," he continued. "What if Grant Tech established a foundation to fund advanced technology education in rural communities?" "Starting right here?" Olivia watched him with growing interest. "You mean like a grant program?" "More than that," Maxwell elaborated. "A comprehensive initiative, equipment, curriculum development, teacher training, mentorship opportunities with tech professionals. We could create a model here in Lakeside, then scale it to similar communities." "That's actually a wonderful idea," Olivia said, genuine enthusiasm warming her voice. "The school board has been trying to expand STEM offerings for years, but budget constraints always get in the way. It would give me a meaningful project connected to both my professional expertise and our community," Maxwell explained. "And it would benefit Lily and kids like her who have aptitude but limited resources." "Ms. Abernathy mentioned the Advanced Science Program," Olivia said, connecting the dots. "Is that what sparked this?" Maxwell nodded. "Partly. But it's been brewing for a while. I've been looking for the right way to bridge my past life with this one. Not to retreat from Lakeside, but to bring something valuable to it." Olivia studied him thoughtfully, a new appreciation evident in her expression. "You really have changed, haven't you? The Max I knew would have seen a small town as something to escape, not something to invest in." "The Max you knew was chasing external validation," Maxwell replied honestly. "He measured worth by acquisition and achievement. I still believe in building and creating, but now I want those efforts to directly benefit the people I care about." Something shifted in Olivia's expression, a softening, a lowering of guards long maintained. "I think I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "For you to realize that family life in Lakeside isn't enough for someone who once ran a tech empire." "It would never be enough if I were still that person," Maxwell agreed. "But that's not who I am anymore." He sat beside her again, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her shampoo, something herbal and familiar. "This isn't a phase or a sabbatical, Liv. This is my life now, you and Lily and this community. I'm not going anywhere." The declaration hung between them, sincere and unqualified. Olivia's eyes searched his, looking for any hint of reservation or insincerity. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said simply, the three words carrying more weight than elaborate promises could have. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the chorus of spring peepers from the lake and watching the moon rise above the water. When Olivia finally spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. "Your foundation idea, it really is brilliant. It honors both your business acumen and your commitment to Lily's future. The school board would be thrilled." "I'll have legal draw up a proposal," Maxwell said, mental gears already turning. "We could present it at the next board meeting." "We?" Olivia questioned. "If you're willing," Maxwell clarified. "You understand this community, its needs and dynamics, far better than I do. Plus, you're a teacher. Your input would be invaluable." Olivia smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that reminded Maxwell of their college days when possibilities had seemed limitless. "I'd like that. It's been a while since I've been involved in something visionary." The word choice struck Maxwell. Olivia had been an artist with bold, creative vision before pragmatic concerns had narrowed her focus to day-to-day survival and parenting. Perhaps this project could reignite that part of her spirit as well. Your artistic background would be a tremendous asset, Maxwell suggested. The most innovative STEM programs integrate arts education, the whole STEAM approach. You could help shape that component. Olivia's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm he hadn't seen since their reunion. I've read about those integrated programs. They produce more creative thinkers, more innovative problem solvers. Exactly what Grant Tech has always valued in its engineers. Maxwell agreed. They spent the next hour brainstorming possibilities, ideas flowing between them with increasing excitement. By the time Maxwell prepared to leave for his cabin, they had the skeleton of a proposal that could transform educational opportunities not just for Lily, but for every student in Lakeside. At the door, Olivia hesitated, then surprised him with a brief hug, their first physical contact beyond casual proximity since his return. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" Maxwell asked, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected closeness. "For finding a way to stay that honors all parts of who you are," Olivia explained. "That's what I was most worried about, that you'd feel forced to choose between your identity as an innovator and your role as Lily's father." They're not separate identities anymore, Maxwell realized aloud. Just different facets of the same person. The integration he described was perhaps the most profound change of all, the merger of compartmentalized selves into a coherent whole. Before the snowstorm, Maxwell Grant, the CEO, had existed in isolation from any other potential version of himself. Now, those artificial divisions were dissolving, revealing a more authentic and complete identity. Over the following weeks, the foundation idea evolved from concept to concrete plan. Maxwell leveraged his corporate connections to secure initial funding commitments. Olivia navigated local educational politics with diplomatic skill, building community support. Together, they drafted a comprehensive proposal that would establish Lakeside as a pilot site for rural STEM education innovation. The school board meeting where they presented their vision became a turning point for the community. The municipal building's meeting room was packed beyond capacity, with residents spilling into the hallway, straining to hear as Maxwell and Olivia tag-teamed the presentation. What Mr. Grant and Ms. Winters are proposing would transform educational opportunities for our children, Principal Everett declared after their presentation concluded. This level of investment in Lakeside's future is unprecedented. The board voted unanimously to approve the partnership, triggering a standing ovation from the assembled community members. As applause filled the room, Maxwell glanced at Olivia, finding her eyes already on him, shining with pride and something deeper, a connection reforged through shared purpose. Lily, who had insisted on attending despite the late hour, bounded up to them both. "Does this mean we'll get real 3D printers at school and robotics kits? All of that and more," Maxwell confirmed, laughing at her enthusiasm. "My dad is going to make our school famous," she announced to everyone within earshot, linking her arms through both Maxwell's and Olivia's with proprietary pride. The possessive claim, "my dad," spoken so publicly and naturally, affected Maxwell more deeply than the board's approval or the community's applause. It represented acceptance of a kind he had never valued before, but now recognized as his greatest achievement. Later that night, walking back to Olivia's house under a canopy of stars, the three of them formed a tableau of family harmony that would have been unimaginable months earlier. Lily skipped ahead, still buzzing with excitement about educational possibilities, while Maxwell and Olivia followed at a more measured pace. "Tonight feels like a beginning," Olivia observed quietly. "Of what?" Maxwell asked. She considered for a moment. "Of something lasting, something we're building together, not just for Lily, but for this place that's been my home, our home." The inclusive pronoun didn't escape Maxwell's notice, nor did the way Olivia's hand brushed against his as they walked, a tentative gesture that he answered by gently taking her fingers in his. She didn't pull away. As May blossomed into early summer, Maxwell's life in Lakeside continued to deepen and expand. The foundation work provided intellectual challenge and purpose. His relationship with Lily grew more natural and multifaceted each day, and something new was evolving between him and Olivia, a cautious rekindling that honored their complex history while acknowledging present attraction. They hadn't discussed this emerging dimension explicitly. Both seemed content to let it develop organically, without pressure or expectation. Small moments accumulated, lingering conversations after Lily went to bed, casual touches that grew more deliberate, shared glances that communicated without words. One evening in early June, Maxwell arrived at Olivia's house for their regular dinner to find her alone on the porch, looking uncharacteristically apprehensive. "Where's Lily?" he asked, immediately noticing her absence. "Sleep over at Emma's house," Olivia explained. "It was a last-minute invitation. I hope you don't mind that it's just us tonight." "Of course not," Maxwell assured her, though he noted the unusual tension in her posture. "Is everything okay?" Olivia nodded, then hesitated. "I've been thinking about us, Max, about what's been happening between us these past months." Maxwell's heart rate accelerated. "So have I." "We've been careful," Olivia continued, "cautious about rushing into anything that might complicate Lily's adjustment or our co-parenting relationship." That seemed wise. Maxwell agreed, carefully neutral while his pulse thundered in his ears. "It was," Olivia acknowledged. "But I'm starting to wonder if we're using caution as an excuse to avoid risk." She met his eyes directly. "I have feelings for you, Max. Not just echoes from our past, but new feelings based on who you are now." The admission, so straightforwardly delivered, stole Maxwell's breath momentarily. When he found his voice, it emerged with unexpected hoarseness. "I have feelings for you too, Liv. They never really went away, just got buried under ambition and pride." Olivia smiled slightly. "We're different people now. You're not the ambitious student I fell for in college, and I'm not the idealistic artist you left behind." "Better versions of ourselves, I think," Maxwell suggested. "Tempered by experience, more aware of what truly matters." "That's what I believe too," Olivia said softly, "which is why I wanted to talk tonight without Lily present. To ask if you'd consider trying again. Not just as co-parents, but as partners." The invitation, tentative yet clear, represented everything Maxwell had been hoping for, but hesitant to pursue. "Are you sure? After everything that happened?" "I wouldn't suggest it if I weren't," Olivia replied with characteristic directness. "The past is part of our story, but it doesn't have to define our future. You've proven your commitment to Lily beyond any doubt. I trust that part completely now." "And us?" Maxwell asked quietly. "That we'll have to build day by day," Olivia answered honestly. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Maxwell closed the distance between them, taking both her hands in his. "I've been falling in love with you all over again," he admitted. "With the strength you've shown raising Lily, with your wisdom and integrity, with the way you've allowed me to earn a place in both your lives despite every reason to shut me out." Olivia's eyes glistened with unexpected moisture. "I never expected this outcome when you appeared at my door in that snowstorm." "Neither did I," Maxwell acknowledged. "But it feels like coming home in a way I never anticipated." He hesitated, then asked, "What about Lily? How do we explain this shift to her?" "Carefully," Olivia advised. "But honestly, she's perceptive. Max, I think she's already sensed the change between us." "So we move forward together," Maxwell said. The words both question and declaration. Olivia's answer came not in words, but in action as she leaned forward and kissed him. A gentle, exploratory gesture that quickly deepened into something more profound. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, she smiled. "Together," she confirmed. "One day at a time." The summer evening stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. Inside, Olivia had prepared dinner for two, a deliberate choice that spoke of planning and intention. Outside, the lake shimmered in the golden light of sunset, a constant reminder of how nature transformed with each season. As they moved inside, hand in hand, Maxwell reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. A snowstorm that had seemed like disaster had instead delivered him to his greatest fortune. The loss of control he had so feared had become the gateway to authentic connection, and the small town he might once have dismissed as insignificant had become the center of a life richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined possible. 2 years later, on a perfect September afternoon, Maxwell stood on the shore of Lake Willow adjusting his tie. The surface of the water reflected the cloudless blue sky, creating a seamless canvas of azure that stretched from horizon to heaven. Behind him, wooden chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arbor woven with late-season wildflowers and trailing vines. Purple asters, golden black-eyed Susans, and the deep crimson of sugar maple leaves just beginning their autumn transformation. "Nervous?" asked Tom Jenkins, who had moved from neighbor to friend to best man over the course of Maxwell's time in Lakeside. "Strangely, not at all," Maxwell replied truthfully. "This feels like the most natural step imaginable." 2 years had passed since the snowstorm that had stranded him at Olivia's door. 2 years of gradual integration into the fabric of Lakeside, of building relationships, of learning to be not just a father to Lily, but a partner to Olivia and a contributing member of a community he now proudly called home. The Grant Tech Rural Education Initiative, begun as a single community pilot program, had expanded to 17 schools across Minnesota's rural counties, providing state-of-the-art technology education to children who might otherwise have limited access. Maxwell split his professional time between overseeing this foundation work and his continued role as Grant Tech's strategic advisor, having permanently transitioned day-to-day CEO responsibilities to his capable COO. "Places, everyone," called Sarah, Olivia's sister and maid of honor, emerging from the lakeside cabin that had served as the bridal preparation area. "They're ready to begin." Guests settled into their seats, a blend of Lakeside locals who had embraced Maxwell as one of their own and Minneapolis connections who had made the journey to witness this unexpected chapter in the life of a man once known solely for his business acumen. Maxwell's former executive assistant Taylor sat in the front row, still occasionally expressing amused disbelief at her former boss's transformation from urban CEO to small-town family man. The string quartet, brought in from Minneapolis at Maxwell's insistence despite Olivia's protests that it was extravagant, began playing. All heads turned toward the cabin, where the door opened to reveal Lily, now 11 and radiant in a simple blue dress that matched the lake behind her. She carried a small basket of wildflowers and wore a crown of braided grass and tiny white blossoms in her hair. As she walked the path toward the arbor, Lily maintained the solemnity appropriate to her role as flower girl for approximately 10 steps before breaking into a grin so infectious that laughter rippled through the assembled guests. By the time she reached Maxwell, she was practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad," she whispered loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "Mom looks like a princess." "I can't wait to see," Maxwell whispered back, squeezing her hand before she took her place beside Sarah. The music shifted to the traditional wedding march, and Olivia appeared in the cabin doorway. Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. She wore not a conventional wedding gown, but a simple dress of flowing ivory silk that seemed to capture and release light with every movement. Her honey-blonde hair, now streaked with subtle silver at the temples, was arranged in loose waves around her face, adorned only with a single white lily tucked behind one ear. As Olivia walked toward him, Maxwell found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had led them to this moment, not just the dramatic reunion of the snowstorm, but the patient rebuilding that had followed. They had chosen to move slowly, deliberately, ensuring that their relationship was built on present truth rather than past nostalgia or future expectations. The legal adoption of Lily had come first, with Maxwell officially claiming the paternal rights he had once unknowingly relinquished. The little girl had insisted on a celebration she called their family birthday, marking the day the courts recognized what their hearts already knew, that they belonged together, as father and daughter. The proposal had followed 6 months later, not a grand romantic gesture, but a quiet conversation on their familiar porch, where so many important moments had transpired. Maxwell had presented Olivia not with a traditional diamond, but with a pendant containing 3 interlocking circles crafted from different materials: gold for him, silver for her, copper for Lily. The symbolism wasn't lost on Olivia, who had accepted with tears and laughter intermingled. Now, as she reached the arbor where Maxwell waited, her eyes held the same blend of emotion, joy tinged with the poignancy of a path that had wound through separation and pain before finding its way back to connection. "Hi," she said softly as she took her place beside him. "Hi," he answered, suddenly unable to produce more eloquent words. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They had written their own vows, each acknowledging the unusual nature of their journey while celebrating the strength that had emerged from its challenges. "Olivia," Maxwell began when his moment came, "I once believed that success was measured in achievements and acquisitions. You showed me that true success lies in the capacity to love completely and be fully present in that love. When I left you all those years ago, I was running toward what I thought was greatness. When I returned, lost, cold, and humbled, I discovered that greatness had been waiting for me all along in you and in our daughter." Tears shimmered in Olivia's eyes as she responded with her own vows. "Maxwell, life rarely follows the paths we imagine for ourselves. The artist I was expected a different canvas than the one I received. But what seemed like abandoned dreams became the foundation for deeper ones. In losing you, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. In raising Lily, I discovered joy beyond imagination. And in your return, I learned that forgiveness isn't just about releasing the past. It's about embracing new possibilities with open eyes and an open heart." They exchanged rings, simple, bands inscribed with the words "every day," chosen to symbolize their commitment to making their relationship a daily conscious decision rather than a one-time promise. "By the power vested in me," concluded Pastor Mitchell, who had known Olivia since childhood, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Before he could suggest that Maxwell kiss his bride, Lily darted forward from her position. "Does this mean we're officially a family now? Like legally and everything?" Laughter rippled through the gathering at the earnest interruption. "Yes, sweetheart," Olivia confirmed, drawing her daughter into the embrace as she and Maxwell shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Officially and everything. The reception that followed embodied the blend of worlds that characterized their new life together. Tables set up along the lakeshore featured gourmet catering alongside potluck contributions from lakeside neighbors. The playlist alternated between classical pieces performed by the string quartet and popular dance music that had Lily and her friends demonstrating the latest TikTok choreography to amused adults. As evening approached, Edison bulbs strung between trees illuminated the celebration with a warm, golden glow. Maxwell found a moment of quiet amid the festivities, standing at the water's edge watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and rose. "Penny for your thoughts," Olivia said, appearing beside him. She had kicked off her formal shoes, her bare feet in the cool grass a reminder of the free-spirited artist he had first fallen in love with. "I was thinking about snowstorms," Maxwell admitted. "About how what seems like disaster can actually be course correction." Olivia nodded, understanding immediately. "When your car slid off the road that night, I was terrified of letting you into our lives. I thought you would disrupt everything we'd built." "I probably would have if I'd still been the man who left," Maxwell acknowledged. "But I think I was already changing before then. The medical scare, the emptiness of achievement for its own sake, I was searching for something I couldn't name." "And now?" Olivia asked, slipping her hand into his. "Now I know exactly what matters," Maxwell replied simply. "And it was never the things I spent a decade pursuing." From the reception area, Lily called out, "Mom! Dad! It's time for the anniversary surprise!" They exchanged puzzled glances. "Anniversary?" Olivia questioned. "We just got married an hour ago." "I think she means a different anniversary," Maxwell realized aloud as they walked back to join the gathering. Indeed, Lily stood proudly beside a small table that hadn't been there during dinner. On it sat a cake, not the elegant wedding cake that had already been cut and served, but a homemade creation decorated with somewhat lopsided frosting and the words "Happy Family Birthday" written in blue icing. It's been exactly 2 years since Dad got stuck in the snowstorm and found us, Lily announced to the assembled guests. "So today isn't just your wedding day, it's also the anniversary of our family beginning." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Maxwell deeply. Leave it to Lily to recognize and honor the fuller significance of the day. "I made it myself," she added with unmistakable pride. "Well, Ms. Abernathy helped with the oven part, but I did all the decorating." "It's perfect," Olivia assured her, examining the slightly tilted layers and exuberant sprinkles with appropriate admiration. "Absolutely perfect," Maxwell agreed, wrapping an arm around each of his favorite people in the world. As they cut this second, more meaningful cake together, all 3 hands on the knife, Maxwell reflected on how thoroughly his definition of perfection had changed. Once he would have measured it in flawless execution, pristine aesthetics, controlled outcomes. Now he recognized perfection in the beautiful messiness of family life, in off-center cakes made with love, in unexpected interruptions to solemn moments, in relationships that had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. Later, as the celebration continued under a canopy of stars, Maxwell found himself approached by an unexpected guest, his former CFO, Richard Harmon, who had made the drive from Minneapolis despite having stepped back from Grant Tech operations the previous year. "I almost didn't recognize you," Richard commented, gesturing with his champagne glass. "And I don't just mean the casual attire." Maxwell smiled, acknowledging the transformation that went beyond his exchange of tailored suits for more relaxed clothing. 2 years can change a person. "It's more than time," Richard observed astutely. "You seem unburdened. The Maxwell Grant I worked with for a decade carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. You move differently now." "I found a better measuring stick for success," Maxwell explained simply. Richard nodded toward where Lily was teaching a group of local children and Minneapolis visitors alike the fine art of skipping stones across the lake's surface. Olivia supervised with relaxed attention, occasionally demonstrating her own surprisingly skilled technique. "I can see that," Richard said. "Though I have to admit, when you first announced you were staying in this town and restructuring your role at Grant Tech, most of the board thought you were having some kind of breakdown." Maxwell laughed, unsurprised by the revelation. "And now? Now they're studying your educational foundation as a model of innovative corporate philanthropy," Richard replied. "The irony isn't lost on me. You're actually having more positive influence on the industry by stepping back from it." The observation aligned with Maxwell's own experience. By releasing his death grip on control and allowing others to rise within Grant Tech's structure, he had created space for fresh perspectives and approaches. The company was thriving, the foundation was expanding its impact, and he was present for the moments that truly mattered in his personal life. "We're thinking of expanding the family," Maxwell shared, surprising himself with the disclosure. "Lily's been asking for a sibling. Given Olivia's age, we're exploring adoption." Richard raised his eyebrows. Maxwell Grant, building a dynasty of a different kind. "Not a dynasty," Maxwell corrected gently. "Just a family." As the evening deepened into night, guests gradually departed with warm embraces and promises of future gatherings. The wedding party helped dismantle decorations and pack leftover food for distribution to elderly neighbors who couldn't attend, a lakeside tradition that Maxwell had come to appreciate. Finally, only the immediate family remained: Maxwell, Olivia, and Lily, plus Sarah, who would be staying with Lily while the newlyweds spent a brief honeymoon weekend in Duluth. Best wedding ever, Lily declared through a yawn as they walked back to the house that had once been just hers and Olivia's, but had become their shared home 6 months earlier when Maxwell sold the cabin. I'm inclined to agree, Olivia said, smiling up at her husband. It's late. Squirrel, Sarah told her niece. Time for sleep. Your parents have an early drive tomorrow. Okay, but first... Lily stopped walking and turned to face Maxwell and Olivia with unexpected seriousness. I just want to say thank you. For the wedding? Olivia asked, puzzled. You don't need to thank us for that, sweetheart. No, not for the wedding, Lily clarified. For fixing our family. For trying again, even though it was hard sometimes. Some of my friends have parents who don't even talk to each other anymore. The simple gratitude, delivered with such earnest sincerity, caught both adults off guard. Maxwell knelt to meet his daughter at eye level, as had become his habit when important conversations arose. We should be thanking you, he told her, for giving me a second chance, for being patient while we figured things out. And for reminding us what really matters, Olivia added, joining them at Lily's level. You've been the heart of this family from the beginning. Lily's smile illuminated her face as she pulled them both into a fierce hug. I love our story, she declared. Even the sad parts, because they made the happy parts happen. The wisdom in her observation struck Maxwell anew. Their journey, with all its complexities, missteps, and painful chapters, had indeed been necessary to create the profound appreciation they now shared for their reconstructed family. Later that night, after Lily had finally been persuaded to bed and Sarah had retreated to the guest room, Maxwell and Olivia stood on their familiar porch. The lake stretched before them, silver-black under moonlight, the same view they had shared through seasons of cautious reconnection and growing trust. Mrs. Grant, Maxwell said softly, testing the new appellation. Actually, Olivia corrected with a smile, it's still Winters professionally. The students and parents at school would be too confused by a name change mid-year. But I rather like Winters Grant for personal matters. Winters Grant it is, Maxwell agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they gazed at the starlit landscape. Appropriate, given that winter brought us back together. Olivia leaned into his embrace. Who would have thought a snowstorm could be the best thing to happen to us? I've been thinking about that, Maxwell mused. About how sometimes we need to lose our way completely before we can find the right path. Very philosophical for a tech executive, Olivia teased gently. Former tech executive, Maxwell corrected. Current Education Foundation director, small-town resident, and as of today, husband and father, officially and legally in all capacities. The fullness of these roles settled around him like a comfortable garment. Tailored not to project status or wealth, but to facilitate the life he had come to value above all else, a life of presence, purpose, and deep connection. What do you think the Maxwell of 11 years ago would say if he could see you now? Olivia asked, turning in his arms to face him. Maxwell considered the question seriously. I think he'd be confused at first, possibly concerned about my career trajectory. He smiled wryly. But then he'd see you and Lily, and this place we've built together, and he'd understand that he had been asking all the wrong questions about what constitutes success. And what are the right questions? Olivia prompted. Not what have you achieved, but whom do you love and how well do you love them? Maxwell answered without hesitation. Not what do you possess, but what possesses your heart. And the answers? Olivia's eyes held his, reflecting starlight and the deeper illumination of understanding. You, Maxwell said simply. You and Lily and this life we're creating together. That's what possesses my heart completely. Olivia's response was wordless, a kiss that communicated everything words could not, blending gratitude for the past, celebration of the present, and promise for the future they would continue building together. As they eventually turned